Hey, Caitlin. I wanted to leave you some feedback on Essay 1. Overall, I think that this is working quite well. You have a claim. You've supported your claim with key ideas. You bring in evidence to support those, and you begin to unpack that evidence in your explanation in those paragraphs. So structurally, it works really well. I think the logic of the argument, your argument, is pretty sound. Um, so overall, I think it's working. There's just a couple of things here and there that I want to talk to you about. First off, with your works cited page, it looks like that you have this formatted in APA, but remember you are working in MLA, and like your paper here is not formatted in APA; it's formatted in MLA. So make sure that you are you're using a consistent style system throughout the entire essay. And so if you ended up using the electronic version of this essay instead of the version that I gave you, what I would do is go to OWL at Purdue and look up MLA electronic articles, and it'll show you how to format that. And there's a link in the resources folder to OWL at Purdue. So let's talk a couple things here and there about making this stronger. So first off, it's a short story. So in MLA, shorter works are always in quotation marks, not italics. I think you're setting or you're creating pretty good summary details here. There's a couple things that I wanna quibble with you here about your word choice. Um, he, meaning the prisoner, doesn't, I wouldn't say he dies due to capital punishment. Technically, he dies due to hanging, right? To being hung, or being hanged, I should say. I'm sorry. So the hanging is what causes his death, not the capital punishment itself. Capital punishment is the sentence, I suppose, that he receives, or it's the it's what category we would actually put the sentence in, right? To separate it from just being murder, excuse me, right? If it's state sanctioned murder, we call it capital punishment. That's how we keep it separate from murder. But like if you think about that, we don't die because of murder. We die because of, whatever the person used to murder us. Does that make sense what I'm saying here? So I think just clarify your ideas here. So I think you could set up the sentence to say something like he's sentenced to capital punishment. Specifically, he is sentenced to die by hanging, right? So you just need to clarify there. I like what you say here. Um, I am I'm a little stuck on your word choices of inferences because I'm not so sure that Orwell ever makes inferences, but I think that the reader can make inferences in order to figure out Orwell's argument. So perhaps what you meant here is he's implicit, right? Because that is one of the things that we said, and that is one of the things that is true, that this is an implicit argument. He never states it directly. There's no thesis statement, but it's suggested throughout the text. So and I'm pointing this out because that's your thesis, right? So you want your thesis to be solid. And I don't really think there's inferences in this text. However, as readers, we can use inferences in order to make sense of the text, if that makes sense. So this is clear, but I think it's this section that isn't kind of clear. And this is important because this is essentially your reason, right? You're using that claim because reason model, you've just flip-flopped them. So your reason is before your claim. That's perfectly acceptable. It's just the word choice that's a little confusing. So this paragraph has really great movement. You talk about setting, um, and you're bringing in specific lines of evidence, which is great. Um, and yeah, and so here's what you can say here. So when Orwell says this, he is not using an inference. He is making us, right, through his description, use inferences in order to understand what he's suggesting about their treatment. So you give a brief explanation of the evidence, but I don't think you fully say it, right? So you say he's describing what the officer sees as gloomy and dark and depressing by using words like sickly and condemned, thus implying his opinion on capital punishment as cruel and callous. Um, so, what is it about sickly and what is it about condemned? Does that make sense? So, when you are bringing out specific word choices like that and you're saying, look at what he's saying about setting, you have to fully explain why the word sickly would lead us to cruel and callous, right? Does that make sense what I'm saying? To me, like sickly, I see what you're doing there, but I might, if I'm focusing on sickly, I might say that if I describe something as sickly, that means it's not well, right? There's something wrong with it. It needs to be treated. So if you think about what he's saying there, um, the justice system in this particular situation is unwell, right? If he uses that word sickly. Does that make sense? So it's like you're so close to being there. I think you just need to fully explain what the evidence is doing. Um here's something else where I'm going to quibble with you, because again, I would not say that this is an inference. He's being as direct as he ever gets in this essay. And remember, an inference is an educated guess about the meaning. He's being super clear here. So I wouldn't say that he's doing an inference. I think you could say that this is as direct that he gets, or the implicit argument becomes aware here, or you could call this the epiphany moment, and the fact that we are in the guard's head, right? And we are able to hear the epiphany, but it's not an inference, right? So using that word choice there might cause some confusion with your reader. I really like what you're doing in this paragraph when you're discussing ethos. I think this is working well. The only other suggestion I would give to you is you summarize the argument quite well, but that's where you end us. So with conclusions, you want to go beyond summary and give some kind of application or call to action, or perhaps make a final statement about why this text is important, or who it's important for, or why it's important to examine arguments like this, something of that nature. So you just don't summarize there. You're doing something new in your final paragraph. So those are the things that I would leave you with, but know that overall I think it's working really well. All right, thanks, and let me know if you have questions.